Hello, everybody. It is Brian from Boris Effects back with you all for another live stream. We have an exciting presentation today. We are going to be looking at Sapphire 2020.5 with Ben Brownlee. Ben's going to take us through all the new jam features with Jam Packed and Sapphire. Ben, say hello.
Hello. Thanks for joining me, everyone.
So today we have a nice little panel of Sapphire experts to kind of chime in and take questions from the audience. Joining us along with Ben is Alan Lawrence, product manager for Sapphire. Hello, Alan.
Hi, how are you?
Good. And also joining us from Toronto, Canada, Nick Harauz from Creative 111. Say hello, Nick.
Great to be here, Brian. How's everyone doing?
We are doing great. We have been live since noon yesterday, so I'm officially spent. No, it's been super fun. We've had some great presentations. We've given away some great prizes, and we're going to continue to do that today. So let me give everyone the overview. Once again, we're giving away a ton of great prizes today after Ben's presentation. Let me look and see what we're giving away. We're giving away a seat of Vegas Pro. We're giving away a $200 gift certificate to Action VFX. We're giving away a 1-year subscription to Avid Media Composer. We're giving away Cormel Paint X. We're giving away the Boris Effects bundle, a 1-year subscription to Sapphire Continuum Mocha Pro, and we're giving away a 1-year subscription to Silhouette and a 1-year subscription to the new Silhouette Paint plugin for Adobe or Effects. So like, subscribe, or share. Smash that like button, leave a comment, and that will enter you to win. We're going to be picking randomly from all our social media channels. We are live streaming to about 10 different platforms right now. We're on a couple different Facebook channels. We're on a couple different YouTube channels. We're on Twitch. We're on Twitter. So if you're wherever you're watching, then leave a comment, and we will just randomly go through and pull people for different prizes and announce them after Ben's Sapphire presentation. Also, the Boris Effects sale is going on right now. So everything we sell is 25% off. That is, subscriptions, new permanent licenses, upgrades, renewals, units, and multi-product new perpetual bundles. Those are 50% off. So Sapphire and Continuum, or Mocha and Sapphire, those big product bundles, those are 50% off. Great value. So without further ado, let's get going with some Sapphire. Mr. Ben Brownlee, take it away.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we are going to be looking at lens flare. In fact, we're going to spend an hour looking at Sapphire's lens flare filter, which is one of my favorite ones, and also something that, Boris Effects have put in a lot of effort in over the last few versions into sort of updating and improving it. And actually, I couldn't wish for a better panel than what we've got here when I'm talking about lens flares, as we'll see in the next hour. But while we're doing this, let's have a look at why I think that that lens flares are so special, and let's play this through. Yeah, let's not start at the beginning of the video. Let's just start it like halfway through.
Hold on.
That'd be nice and professional.
Well, now we get Alan live. Now we're totally screwed up. Hold on.
The joys of live streaming.
Boom.
There we go. See, this is what I was after, because these are obviously some real lens flares, and this sort of brings me a lot of joy, because I love what lens flares give us. It's a natural phenomenon. It's something that is used a lot, sometimes overused a lot, and people love it or they hate it. And I'm going to push people into loving it, because what a good compassionate lens flare will give you is just to give you a sort of movement within your shot, a bit of life that wasn't there previously, and it sort of adds to what we're trying to do. The reason that people hate it is because of these sort of things, where they're the sort of really old-fashioned kind of dead lens flares that really don't do anything, or they're kind of just completely out of place lens flares that really don't enhance what we're trying to do either. So the reason that I like lens flares is because of this sort of natural look. You know, a natural lens flare uh, gives sort of surprises. It's not just that kind of dead flare that you happen to see. And this is why I will happily spend hours locked inside dark rooms. There's my hand just there. If you notice that there, I'll spend hours locked in dark rooms, shining different types of lights at different types of lenses to try to just sort of work out what makes a certain flare really kind of pop. And there's what I'll try to do then is try to capture that essence into a lens flare that I can use within Sapphire's lens flare. And that's really what we're going to be talking about a bit today. Is my sort of process for coming in and trying to capture the essence of a lens flare. Now, most of the stuff that I do is based off of taking a real world lens and kind of giving it just a little bit of extra maybe. But I've also got there's other ways of using lenses, which some of my other panel members will do, which are a lot more sort of stylized, and they really kind of help to set a completely different mood, and that's kind of where I am with using lens flares in a way, because a good lens flare is kind of like a good choice of film stock, or a good choice of color grade. It's there to help to inform what your project is, and it sort of lets your viewers know straight away what they should be sort of expecting. It's become part of the grammar of filmmaking. So all of these different flares we're seeing at the moment, these are just presets, and these are just presets that come with Sapphire's lens flare, and haven't done anything clever with them. We'll be looking at how we do clever stuff with it. Actually, now let's stop yapping about it and actually start looking at it.
Couldn't agree with you more, Ben. That line about the language of filmmaking is so true, right? It's just like you see lens flares now even used as video games become more cinematic, right? That's a trick they're starting to learn. Starting to put those big, beautiful lens flares. Lens flares are also something that is so universal. Like I can sit down with, and watch a film with my mom, and she will appreciate like the beauty of a lens flare. It's just something that as humans, like we're all attracted to.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're a huge part of filmmaking.
It's true. Yeah. And it's not so long ago that they were, something that was to be avoided. You would put flags up everywhere to stop any kind of flare hitting the lens.
I will never forget, I had an art director one time when I was working on a comp, and he literally looked at me, and this was probably in like 2000, and he said, "Oh, I didn't know lens flares were back." Yeah. He did not mean that in a kind way. I was like, oh, sorry.
Ben, I just wanted to say that is so cool that you took so much time to experiment with flashing lights. I'm just curious, like how many different lenses did you try out in these experiments? Like how many hours have you spent towards that in producing like realistic lens flares?
Hours, I'm not sure. It's well into the double digits.
Wow.
And like there a place in my old studio, the only place that actually was proper blackout enough to do this sort of work was the toilet. So I spent many hours flashing lights in a toilet.
That's so cool.
It's not something I'm proud of.
This is a statement on Benjamin Brownlee more than anything else. Right?
I think that is right. Maybe I shouldn't have said that on
That's okay.
We're these hundreds of people.
It's just amongst friends.
That's fine. Right. Yeah, it's not like we're broadcasting. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've got a collection of vintage lenses that I like. I've got my regular production lenses, and I'm not averse to renting, some lenses that are well out of my my pocket. just to sort of do a lot of this experimentation. There's a lot of work that goes into it, because if you just have one light source that's just moving from left to right, that's not enough information to get a proper flare. The thing about these natural flares is, like, the surprising things that happen when they hit just at a particular place at a particular time at a particular angle. And that's something you can't really predict. It's like this particular one here. As I move the light source off the screen, everything goes dark until you get that extra flash right at the very end, and that's not something that you kind of normally expect. You've got a light source that's just comes right off the screen, and only when it's down here and away that it does something extra special. And it's something that it's that randomness, that surprise that we're trying to capture. Let's come into After Effects. I don't really even need to come into After Effects. I'm going to come into the Flare Designer, because this is where I do a lot of my work, in the Sapphire Flare Designer. So this is a standalone app where you can be coming in, experimenting with flares, and then saving them out as presets to use in whatever host you want to. And this comes as part of the Adobe, OFX, and Avid installs. And it also lets us have a little look at all of the presets, and this is something that I think has been very exciting for Sapphire lens flare over the last, probably the last year and a half. Is just the amount of new presets that have been developed. A lot of them by the people in this stream. Some of the
100%, right? Yeah. Shout out to Nick Harauz for your beautiful lens flare presets.
If we look at
Alan and Ben, I will say that I'm the only one who has not contributed amongst this panel. So yeah, you guys make some beautiful, beautiful flares. Alan, how many flares total presets do we have now? It's over.
Ooh, well, I mean, we continually kind of refresh the collection and kind of take out some of the older ones. We deprecate them. You can always get at those if you need to, but we take them out of general population. So I think there's right now 50, fresh ones.
Yeah,
possibly more than that. Yeah, quite a. It's hard. I keep filtering them down to favorites and things like that. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that has also changed in the last version, is that because there are so many more ways of just filtering this stuff out. The news would pop up here as we're in a alpha version of the software. There's nothing new in here today, but you've also things like the featured ones. So these are some of Alan's favorites, obviously, and my own favorites that I've got here. But we've also got like components which we'll look at when we start to build up our own lenses, and these are kind of almost shortcuts. They're kind of Lego bricks for getting a lens started. Because if we look at actually, let's look back at my favorites here. If we look at just a regular one of my little ones here, which is the Kawa Evolution. This is I think it's a $60,000 lens, so it's not it's not one that you're obviously going to be buying a lot of.
I hope you rented that.
It's not in my collection anymore.
No.
But because of the amount of complexity to this lens, because of what I like to do is sort of make those little surprises as things go off screen. It is made up of quite a lot of different elements, and if you're sort of just starting out in trying to build up lenses, or sorry, flares, then all of this can seem like a little bit kind of overwhelming. I know I certainly did when I was starting out. So just having these components to kind of drag and drop to build up your lenses is actually, it's a very, very useful thing.
Ben, if we can take a step back for a second, and just before we had the components, which were new in 2019, I believe.
0.5?
The way you would build them would be from the elements at the top.
Yeah.
And
so you'd be coming up, and you'd just be building up from here.
And you'd change the color gradients, and you'd set the blurring and the animation and everything piece by piece, and of course that's the way you get exactly the result you want. But it's not a quick process, and so that's where the components really comes in. With you find a nice kind of pre-made hotspot that you might like. You find some some of the streaks or the horizontal elements or something. You just kind of put these pieces together, and in just a very little amount of time, you've got something that's a lot more interesting without having to fiddle with a lot of different things.
Yeah, and even though you're using these components here, like everything is exactly the same as if you'd built these up from scratch. I mean, you've got full control over things like the color and stuff. So, you're not missing out on being able to customize these exactly how you want to, just because you've used a component to start things up.
Yeah, it's a shortcut. You skipped a lot of steps, or a lot of steps were done for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, one question from the chat that is too long for me to answer. So can you talk about how is it possible to keyframe individual elements or add any sort of animation to individual elements of the flares?
Yes, and we will definitely be looking at that.
Great.
I'll come back to that because I think that's a big topic to just dive into.
Cool.
Because that comes into my sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Mythology? No, that's not the word. Methodology. That's the one. Methodology of how I approach sort of building up these flares. So you come in and you get your. Oh, let's start off, because I'll show you how I build my stuff, and then we can probably talk to some of the other guys about how they sort of approach theirs. Because I always start with a hotspot. I think that's a kind of core thing for me, and I'm often looking at let's bring this in here, and I'm often looking at like a reference model here, and I'll just kind of have that. Let's find something which is a bit less shiny. Let's find something there, something like that. So I'll often start with a reference here, and I'll kind of try to break it down and just go, okay, what's interesting about this? Well, we've got the hotspot here, which is giving me, a nice kind of very big hotspot in the middle. And then I've got something a bit lighter in the outside. And then I've got a big glow coming out there. And so that's sort of how I'll approach it. I'll sort of go, okay, well, I need my big hotspot in there. I'll get something else that is kind of a bit smaller, and maybe just come in here and find the color for it, something around about that, and then just blow that out a little bit, maybe take the brightness down. And then what I kind of like to do is just sort of duplicate up an element, which is going to be cool glow here, and then just do something with this. So either take the brightness down and the size up, or sometimes, especially with hotspots, I actually like to kind of have opposing colors sort of just overlapping a little bit on them. So I kind of like change the color of this one, maybe just a little bit, maybe to a slightly different color blue, and then just sort of offset that a little bit, and then take this one, offset it just in the other direction. So we kind of get a another little overlap, but it's not exactly the same color all the way through. So we just got a slight sort of randomness going on in there. Then once I've built up that kind of, the sort of first glow coming in, let's call this one hotspot. I like to keep things a little bit ordered. The next thing I'm looking at is probably what's happening with the rays around the hotspot, because that's another big kind of telltale sign about what's going to set this flare apart, is how these rays are going to be working.
Shout out to that Windows QuickTime player, Ben. Love it.
Do you know the only reason I've kept QuickTime around is because VLC doesn't really want to go back and forward, one frame forward and one frame backwards easily. So I've installed that for the live stream, and I uninstall it afterwards because no QuickTime on Windows. No. It's
whatever you want to tell yourself.
It's no good. It's no good. Very insecure. So I'll like come in with like one of the rays, maybe like the shimmer rays is a good one to start with. And there's, I'll take the frequency down quite a bit, because I know this is the sort of thing that I don't want to kind of have, too much in your face straight away. But when I'm designing, like a lot of this work, a lot of the design work is done with the element I'm working on at quite a sort of fat, bright level, and then I'll mix that down, quite quickly afterwards. One of the new things actually you can do with the shimmer rays in 2020.5 is actually come in and sort of taper this over to one side or the other. So instead of just kind of changing the angle up, which we could do before, we can actually push this over towards one side, which might not seem like a big deal, but actually when we start to animate this up a little bit, we can have one side of this shimmer doing something, then the other side of the shimmer doing something completely different. So it's like taking that area, and the only thing again that I'm doing is just gonna like take the taper to the other side, and maybe change the shimmer speed, and then change up the random seed a little bit to kind of make it so that we're not exactly the same over on both sides. So it's kind of like you build up the small individual elements just as we go there, and that's my hotspot, which is kind of just looking like a hotspot at the moment.
Love it. It's a lot of like random slight changes between some of the basic elements that are out there. And Ben, similarly to you, I've used this in looking at some of the building blocks, the components. You could add some of those to the scene. I've seen similar treatments where you'll have 4 or 5 or 6 different elements in the works, and you can make subtle changes and tweak them, along with that awesome new value for taper to just give small little differences between that, the overall building blocks of your lens flare.
And that's it. I think that's what is going to make the difference at the end of it, is that we get all these like small little elements with small changes that aren't quite the same as each other, and then when we come in to animate them, that's when we can really start to sort of turn up those differences quite a lot.
I think that's important because when you look at it, if you've looked at enough of lens flares off of real lenses, you realize that as expensive as some of those lenses are, they still do a lot of weird things in different areas that you would think that they're trying their hardest to avoid, but the light sources still do a lot of strange things, and that's what makes these little adjustments so important is it makes it seem like it is real because it's not perfect.
Yeah, that's it. It's trying to capture the imperfections. We're trying to sort of capture that randomness and those surprises in something that is, ultimately what we're building here is derived from a lot of maths. But we're trying to sort of fool the viewer into thinking that all of this is absolutely random and natural, and that's the job of a good flare.
Also, as you're designing this, Ben, I don't know if you have your own sort of workflow and projects you work on, but when I'm working on flares, I think I try to think of two different types of flares. One that would work really well on top of footage, because I'm not I don't have cameras. I'm not shooting footage. I'm not doing production work. So I have to kind of put myself in the user's shoes. So I look at things that might look good on top of footage and things that might look good on top of a motion graphics project or something where the flare is going to be a lot more prominent. And sometimes something that I designed that just looks just so wild on black. You just look at it and go, there's no way I would ever use this. But then you put it on the footage and it works perfectly fine. So
That's it.
how much of that do you keep in mind when you're doing this?
Actually, quite a bit. I mean, my thought process is always tends to go to footage first, and then the motion graphic stuff, because that's not really how a lot of my brain is wired for the flares now, not how my eyes been working. I know that there are going to be some of those flares, especially like the anamorphic ones that are going to work on motion graphics. But I think that most of the ideas that I'm sort of thinking of are all about how it's going to work in on top of sort of real footage, and just go, where would I use this? What would I use this for? That sort of kind of really kind of tempers where I'm going, because like sometimes it's actually very easy to make a flare that's just completely wild and just it looks kind of cool when you're kind of just whizzing it around a little bit, but it becomes absolutely unusable on footage, because most of the work that I've been doing has been on real world footage. So it's been a lot of commercial work. So it's you're trying to get a natural flare that just kind of makes everything look a lot more expensive than it actually might be. And then you've got the other side of things where you can go a little bit crazier and use a lens flare as just a motion background for other text. If we've got time, that's maybe something we can have a look at in a little bit. Just how some of the stuff within this filter kind of really kind of lends itself to making motion backgrounds or to sticking it onto text itself.
So funny, Ben, how like our brains couldn't be exact opposites. Like I am the complete, like, to me it is lens flares on black, right? I'm always thinking of them as like riding the edge of type, or like behind type, or like maybe it's just as like early in my career, that's how I primarily use them. And I'm more still, when I watch movies, they wash over me and I'll have to like pop out of it and think like, there's no way that's a real flare. You know what I mean? But I much more think of them as like, I'm often disappointed because I think they look so beautiful over black, and then I see them over footage, and when it all blends together, I'm like, oh, you're losing some of the nuance. Like, funny.
No, because one of the things that I like when I'm designing is not thinking how the flare is going to look when it's here on screen. I'm thinking about how it's going to look when it's just here.
Sure, off screen. Yeah.
When it's off screen, or when it's way off screen, what's going to happen with that? Because when I'm doing all of this stuff, I'm driving the lens flare with motion tracking data. So it's that kind of that sort of natural motion tracked data where everything's kind of waving around a little bit, and that's where I'm always looking for where those surprises are going to come, where those little pops are just going to happen.
Hey, just quick shout out from the forums. You can preview the Sapphire Flare Designer over footage as well if you want. You don't have to just look at it over black. Sometimes it's easier when we're building to see everything over black, but you can load footage in. You can see the little timeline there. And so you can build it, but it's just while you're in the Flare Designer, you're just building a flare. So any of your footage is really just for reference. If you wanted to keyframe this flare, you would jump back into your host and do the keyframing outside of the Flare Designer. Inside the designer is just really like where you're building the building blocks of the flare.
Yeah. So if I'll just load this into to After Effects, and you can see, this is what's going on with this fella here. So you can preview how it's gonna look and how it's gonna react there.
And you can turn that off at the bottom by unclicking the show background option.
Absolutely,
if you wanted to toggle back and forth.
Flip. There we go. You can also A/B it as well, so you can kind of do either compare side by side or just do like a split compare.
Yep.
Sort of wipe that on and off. That's kind of fun.
Very cool.
Shall we look at some of the animation stuff?
Sure.
Yeah. Because I think this is the next bit. Hang on, let's get us back into the Flare Designer. And we'll have a look here. And this is one of the things that always makes me really happy to see. I'm gonna zoom this up because this element here. Take a look at this element as I'm just going to play it back, because this gives me immense joy just watching that element. Hang on, I'm going to take it back a little bit more.
You just rubbing it in my face now with that QuickTime player.
Yeah, make the player as big as possible.
Immense joy.
There we go. Because look, we take a look at that element and how it moves along with the hotspot, and it actually because of what this light's doing, we're getting this rotation that's going on within our spot here. And that's something that when I first looked at designing lens flares, I was like, okay, I don't know how to do this. I don't think we can do this. I'm going to throw my hands up. And then I found out how insanely easy it actually is. I'm just going to create a spot here. I can reposition this spot using the position, and that's going to give me its kind of relative position to the hotspot, or to the hotspot of the flare. Now the slider goes from 1 to -1. 1 is it sits exactly on the hotspot. -1 is it's sort of the mirror twin of what the hotspot's doing. So if I move the hotspot left, it's going to go right. Now, a cool little trick that I like to do, especially with some of the anamorphic lenses, is actually take this position and whiz it like really far in the minus. So if I take that to -3, what we get there is we only get like a spot when my hotspot is really close to the center. So we get this kind of really exaggerated sort of movement going on. And if I'm happy that I've got this second one here now, because I'm going to show you where I've used that in in one of the presets. And if any of you guys have got presets that you have done these sort of tricks in, then shout them out, because this is like the anamorphic energy one. I've used that a lot. So there's kind of like bits and bobs that are just flying around that only show up when the hotspot is in a certain place. And the way that I've done that, actually the Sancor 16 as well, I've used the same sort of trick. The only way that those elements show up is when the hotspot's in a certain position, by taking that position like really far in one direction, either positive or negative, and then like using one of the offsets here. Let's try and find, when you've got like that position really far away, you've got to be quite there we go, maybe sort of take that just as a horizontal stretch. There we go. Yeah, so you've really got a fast moving little spot that just pops in there. So if you're designing stuff for motion graphics, that little trick with taking that position well back into the big positives or the big negatives is a great one to do, because you then end up with elements that are just flying all over the place and just look really cool. But that was a little aside. Sorry about that. That was a didn't mean to get there.
Okay.
I was looking at this little beauty right here. So the way that I got this, or the way that we get this here, is actually, we've got different ways of stretching and distorting our elements. We can just distort them and stretch them up just in the size here, and that's kind of fun. But if we do it just up there, then that's just distorting that element for the entire process. It doesn't change anything. The fun stuff happens down here in animation. And this is where I will spend probably 80% of my time when like making up a flare. Like the bits of like creating all the elements or placing all the elements is relatively fast. The bit that I spend all the time on is the animating bit, because the animation is where these flares are going to come to life. So we've got things like auto scaling. So if I turn the auto scale up, that means that as the element moves around, either closer or further to the center, depending on where we have our size direction, it means our flare, or sorry, our element here is going to be scaling up or scaling down. So that gives us, sort of nice scaling there. Let's set that back to 0. And we can do the same sort of thing with the brightness as well. And this is a trick that I'll do a lot, is like having like elements sort of fade in and fade out and fade over each other, especially these elements up here, like ones where we've duplicated things. Like the only difference between those duplications is going to be down in the animation, and it's going to be like these sort of small animations, so that the scale is going to animate in at a slightly different time, or it's going to fade out at a slightly different time as well.
So essential to have those elements fading in and out. It's with if you didn't have anything fading in and out, it would look like a 15-year-old flare.
Oh yeah.
And it's just not realistic. It just does not look doesn't look right. Have as many things fading in and out as possible. That's kind of my my new rule.
Yeah. And like I should say, you can group things as well, and you can animate on the group or on the individual elements, and you can also change stuff in the group as a like relative to each other as well. So we had different things animating differently within this group. This auto scale brightness would say something like ×1 or something, so it would be scaling relative to what it's normally doing in the individual elements. It's so you can get really fine granular controls over it. It's pretty special. The other thing here is the auto stretch, and I'm going to go wider on this. And actually, let's stick that in there. Let's go. Let's turn the auto rotate off. There we go. So what we can do, especially with where we got it. So especially with someone like the stretch here, we can start to animate up how this kind of stretches and moves as it changes position, as the hotspot changes position in the screen. I'm just going to save this one here because I'm going to come into my other ones over here, and I'll look at all, because I know that I did this trick with the Jupiter 9, which is a fantastic lens that I bought for, I think, about $85 off of eBay. And what was I was using it on the, let's show this over black here so you can see this a bit better. It's this element here, this ring element here. Oh, look, there's the brightness times 0.48. I'm going to turn this up. So I actually animated this in so that as the hotspot moves around, that it kind of starts to face and distort into the right area.
Love that.
So we're kind of like getting that 3D rotation, which we would do with a normal, like a natural flare, and we've just completely cheated it.
Very cool.
How about some of the other people's tricks for how they do animation? What about you, Nick?
First of all, that's like an awesome trick there with the rotation.
I know.
I'm just still looking at that love little piece. You're just gonna have to. Luckily, I have the library, so I can access it. Or I would be saying, "Hey, can you send it to me right now in the chat?"
Yeah, no, Jupiter 985 mil. I think that's one.
Yeah. Hey, before Nick, I just got to say thank you to Anne for pointing out on YouTube that our heads were covering all the controls. The flare designer. So thank you, Anne. Appreciate you having our back. I have minimized us. So I don't think we need to see all of us staring into nothing.
Yes.
I think if everyone pointed at the right place at the right time, that would work really well.
So no, that's such an awesome trick, and I'll speak less to tricks right now, and just kind of talk a little bit about creative process, because I found it so fascinating to hear everyone's. Mine is somewhat of capturing lens flare designs that I see in film and love. So that's one aspect of it. Most recently, I have to point out to The Mandalorian. And all of its episodes, there are some fantastic uses of lens flares. I remember watching in Disney Plus and trying to actually grab a screenshot off my Mac. And you should know that if you're watching in Safari, you can't do that. It actually makes it black. So I had to grab those screenshots with my phone. And then I usually upload a collection of these things either to one of two places. In a public place, I upload them to Pinterest. So a collection of lens flares there. Privately on a project, there's a site called Milanote, which is fantastic. It's great for building kind of mood boards in motion graphic design and video design. On another level, it's kind of interesting. Sometimes when I close my eyes and look at the sun, I see the hot spots behind my eyes and try to visualize those and capture them in certain ways, more kind of dream-esque for lens flares versus in actual cameras.
A legal disclosure: please do not look at the sun.
That's
please
exactly
please do not look at the sun, and not look at the sun, but just closing the eyes, not directly at the sun. With that said, throughout the process of building lens flares, I draw a lot already from the Sapphire preset library. Able to see how all of the components work in an overall lens flare design is so helpful to see what other artists have done within that library to get a sense for how lens flares move. So I like to take apart a lens flare and seeing how it's constructed. And there's two layers of that have been talked about. One is like your overall lens flare, and Ben, you've done it a couple of times, but one great thing is like whether it be a lens flare or a bunch of lens flare elements in a group, or as by themselves, you can easily solo each item, which I love, so that as you go into solo selection, you can go here and see what each component does when you select a preset.
You can multi-select too, so you can see just a couple of items as well.
Yeah, and this kind of super helps with the construction of a lens flare design. Not exactly like Brian, but I love how Brian loves the flashy kind of motion graphics. I draw a lot of inspiration from seeing the preset library and seeing how things look on black. And it's somewhat, realistic when you see it, how it's applied on footage, but I love to kind of see that, deconstruct that and deconstruct both the lens flare designs within the design of the presets and then the individual components that are used in a lens flare. In fact, on some of the presets, one of the challenges for one of them, I'm not sure, I think it was Eye of the Beholder, was using a few of the individual elements at top, but also trying to deconstruct and then reconstruct certain component lens flare elements out of the library, which was a lot of fun to do. One of my favorites being, although somewhat heavy on the system, the lens flare dirt that you can add on top of the lens flare. Some of the elements and textures that are in there, I absolutely love those components and be able to see them and how realistic that is when you shine light in front of existing lenses.
Yeah, that might be a little trick to show people, Ben, if you want to just kind of.
Oh, he's already on it.
Unsolo, just load a preset and then go to components. You can add lens dirt to any existing preset from the components page.
Let's come to this one we've got in process.
Yeah,
and then
such a big part too about having realistic lens flares, right? The imperfections.
Oh yeah.
We got tons of dirt elements right here.
It's like that's often when I see video games or I see some sort of real-time engine that'll make a mistake. It's these too clean flares, and
yeah,
that's when you realize you just never see them represented naturally like that. You definitely kind of like wince almost, like if it's too clean.
I have to mention one more resource that I thought of it. It's on YouTube. Some YouTube some YouTube creators of content put together or assembled all of the lens flares in J.J. Abrams films. And it's like compiled into like a 50-minute movie, but it's like it's not only, there's one for just the Star Trek films, but it looks at all of his movies and it shows every single lens flare throughout it. It's fantastic. You can just watch it and sort of see how the uses of lens flares both stylistically and realistically throughout his bodies of work. And then, his, let's just call it his pivot point, which was Star Trek.
Yeah.
And the amount of lens flares throughout that film.
That was the evolution of his lens flare as well. It starts off, it's there, and then it just sort of comes up and just bites you. It's like it's a stalking tiger. It's fantastic.
Oh
yeah. JJ definitely brought the lens flare back with a vengeance.
Yes, he did.
Do we still have the JJ preset in there?
Oh, we I'm sure we do.
Sure we do at one point. I know. Oh, yeah, there you go.
JJ flare. There we go.
There
we
go.
And I was wrong earlier, Brian. We have over 120 presets in there right now.
20 presets.
Wow.
Just answering some questions from the audience. Momo J, Ben, he wants your toilet to build nice flares. Nice one, Momo.
That building's been demolished now. The legendary toilet is gone.
You'll have to go to Denmark, which I think is technically impossible right now.
It's very, very impossible right now. Yeah.
So one thing about Sapphire lens flares, like everything. So Sapphire has a mission statement, right, to be like of the highest quality in almost everything we do. So everything you're seeing here is completely resolution independent. It really doesn't matter. I've seen some crazy people do some like 32K lens flares in Nuke where there's no actual limit on the resolution, or a program like Mystica. I've seen people make ones even bigger. Now, I wouldn't suggest to do that on your laptop, but if you have a big beefy Linux box, you can definitely make these as big as you want. I mean, all joking aside, I've definitely seen some really large lens flares for things like wraparound screens at arenas. Some of these like ridiculous, 100 by 16,000 comps. Some of these vertical signs, and they want their lens flares to look beautiful. So Sapphire is completely resolution dependent, works at any sort of color depth. Also features color management, right? So there's OCIO color management built into these things. So if you're working with an outside monitor, broadcast monitor, you can manage your colors properly and see what it's going to look like. Any of the presets, are shareable between hosts, so it really doesn't matter what host you're in. You can build a flare in Nuke, and you can send it to Flame, or you can build it in Premiere and send it to Vegas. It's all a small text file. So as long as you have Sapphire, you're good to go. And Sapphire too, like when we're talking about a perpetual license for Sapphire, it works in Adobe and OFX. So if you buy Sapphire, it's going to work in After Effects, in Resolve, and Premiere, anything in Adobe, anything in OFX. When you really need the multi-product license is when Avid comes into the mix. So pretty much like, if Avid's not part of your workflow, then you're good with the Adobe OFX license. That's going to cover almost anything. If you do need Avid, we have an Avid only license, or we have the big boy, the multi-host that works in basically like anything we support. The other question that came up a lot, which is a super common question, is like, how is Sapphire different from Video Copilot? So they're very similar products, to be honest with you. Like, I'm sure everyone here is fans of Video Copilot. Optical Flares is an amazing product, right? Like, we're all editors and compositors ourselves, working on our own stuff. And Andrew's tools, are amazing. There's some slight differences between Sapphire and Optical Flares. Like, and I'll let you guys chime in too. I won't put words in your mouth, but for me personally, it's about like what tool you're comfortable in, right? What tool have you spent the most time in? I always tell people, if you've spent like years in Optical Flares, I wouldn't like throw you into Sapphire's lens flare, because things are different. And same thing the other way around. If you spend a lot of time learning Sapphire's lens flares, you jump into optical, it's things are going to be different. We have some kind of like advantages over optical flares, I think, like in terms of the Mocha integrated tracking. That's something that optical doesn't really have, right? So you can go ahead and track these flares with Mocha right inside the effect, and you don't have to keyframe anything. Sapphire is also used on tons of movies, right? And it's used in that because of the overall quality, but also like little kind of things like Sapphire works excellently on a render farm. Doesn't matter what those render farm computers are. Like some could have a GPU, some could be CPU, some could be PCs, some could be Macs. We put a ton of effort into making sure that like a big studio can have a whole 100 boxes on a render farm, export a DPX sequence, and every single frame of that sequence is going to match. And that's why you see companies like ILM, right, use Sapphire. Pixar uses Sapphire. We started off a long time ago. I don't even know, when was Sapphire, Alan, you may know, was lens flare in like, it's got to be version 3 or one of the early ones, right?
I don't even remember when the original lens flare came out. Very early, but then the flare editor, I think, was in Sapphire 7.
7, yeah. I mean, we're talking like, Sapphire V1 was 1998, right? So been around a lot. You've seen Sapphire lens flares in Harry Potter, right? In Return of the Jedi. You've seen them in almost every major picture. You've seen them in every Michael Bay movie. Because for the longest time they were really the premier lens flare for host application like Flame or Nuke, right? But nowadays there are so many cool lens flares tools. It's all really about like your preference, what you like to use.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of crossover as well. If you're comfortable building stuff in oh god, do you know, I've just completely blanked on the Video Copilot. Optical flares. Do you know what? It's been a while since I used that again. But that's where I first started to that's where I was dipping my toes and building my first proper flares was in optical flares, and a lot of that, that those building techniques, cross over really, really easily. If it's all about the process of sort of building that stuff up, and if you don't want to take all the time to do what I do and build up every single element like individually, then you can just slap on a preset, change a color, turn off a couple of elements within 3 clicks, and you've got yourself a flare that you can track within Mocha directly within the flare. So there's none of that kind of back and forth trying to get motion tracking data anywhere. It's all there.
Sapphire, like I see Ross chiming in too on the boards too. I mean, another difference between Sapphire lens flares and optical flares, like working on Linux, right? Sapphire supports full Linux, so you can use these in Resolve or in Nuke on Linux. I mean, there's, like I said, it's really about your preference, about what you want to choose, what you want to use. I'm trying to think. Also working in a lot of these other applications too, like Quantel, right? Like working in Rio, working in Vegas. But for me too, like the biggest difference between optical flares and Sapphire is that like Sapphire lens flares is one part of a massive package, right? Like, I mean, we could spend literally 8 hours and probably get through 30% of Sapphire. And like optical flares, that's that one plugin. That's what it does, right? It just does lens flares. But Sapphire lens flare is just like one part of this massive package. So, a lot of times like people may, look at that and not realize that, it's just really like one piece of the whole puzzle. You're getting lighting effects, you're getting blurs, you're getting transitions, you're getting like crazy psychedelic effects, right? Like you guys have heard me say it all the time. Anyone on TV, when they take drugs, that's Sapphire, right? You see all this like trippy stuff, and I mean, those are all that's like classic Sapphire effects. You're getting the builder, right, which is a whole nother presentation. So like lens flares is just one very important part about Sapphire, but not the main part. And we're always working on it, right? We're always looking to develop it. We're always, shout out to Larissa and David and Jamie, and all our devs who kind of make these amazing tools that let us kind of get on here and have such fun with, but are constantly working on improving the speed and adding functionality and kind of taking all the ideas that are in our head and actually figuring out the math to make that all happen. So they're the true heroes behind the scenes. We're just the desk jockeys that make pretty pictures, right? It's the real skill is really in the development of that. So
there's some exciting new functionality coming in 2020.5 that we're not ready to show yet, but it's one of the things that I've been really excited about, because it's going to give another dimension to making these flares something even more special.
Very cool.
Nice tease, Ben. Nice tease.
I can't say any more than that.
Yeah.
Leave us hanging.
It is 4 o'clock, my friends. It is tea time, right?
goes too fast.
It
goes
is
too
4
fast.
o'clock. Let's give away some prizes. Okay, everyone. Let's switch gears for a second. Congratulations to Dark Corners Review. Dark Corners Review watching on YouTube. You win a seat of Vegas Pro. Congratulations to Dark Corners Review. At Hurtyman on Twitter. That is at HURTEMAN. At Hurtyman on Twitter. Congratulations. You win a $200 online gift certificate to Action VFX. Very cool. Congratulations to that. Putney Alfred Swope on Facebook. Putney Alfred Swope wins a 1-year subscription to Avid Media Composer. Congratulations, Putney.
Oh.
Kenya Martinez on Facebook. Kenya Martinez wins the Core Melt PaintX plugin for FCPX. Congratulations to Kenya Martinez. Michael Kang on YouTube. Michael, congratulations. You win the Boris FX bundle, Sapphire Continuum Mocha Pro 1-year subscription. Congratulations to Michael Kang on YouTube. And oh my Lord, I'm just gonna say, Artie on Twitter, you won. It is at ARTY917063555 at RT917063555 on Twitter. Wins a 1-year subscription to Silhouette. Congratulations. And last but not least, Flavia Rosa on YouTube wins a 1-year subscription to the brand new Silhouette Paint plugin on Adobe and OFX. Congratulations to all our winners, and thank you to all our sponsors. One last pitch: the Boris Effects NAB sale is on right now, so anything we sell is 25% off, and the multi-product perpetual new license bundles are 50% off. So if you want to get Sapphire, subscriptions are $4.95 minus 25%. I am not going to do that math. What is it, like 337 or something, or something like that?
375 maybe.
375. Yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
So that is a great deal on Sapphire. Upgrades are renewals, units. Sapphire is broken down into units too. So if you just wanted to get lens flares, you could actually just buy the Sapphire lighting unit and get glow, and get lens flare too. A whole bunch of effects.
Rays.
Do that, rays, right? Edge rays. So you can do that as well. But anything we sell, Silhouette Paint, the new Silhouette Paint's on sale, Continuum's on sale, and the multi-products are on sale as well. Thank you, Ben, for a great presentation, as always.
Thank you.
Let me switch over to gallery view and loop. Thank you to Nick Harauz for joining us. Nick, always a pleasure. Let's let me promote your Creative 111. Why don't you tell everybody very quickly about what you guys are doing with Creative 11? Because I think it's a really great idea and a really kind of cool idea. So tell us what's going on with Creative 111.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Brian. It's great to see Alan and Ben as well, although not in person right now at NAB, but virtually.
Yes.
Still great. I just next time I just need to know about the camera party you guys are having. But
what's wrong? Just so you guys know, Nick's an extremely talented photographer. Nick's gone and shot the Northern Lights, and now it's true irony that I have a better camera than Nick.
There's a camera party and I didn't even know about it. So I got my little webcam, dark environment at home. So just a couple words about Creative 111. It is a training site. We have a little bit of a focus on work-life balance, which I put together with a fellow trainer by the name of Ian Robinson. What we try to do is offer legend Ian Robinson After Effects. If you guys go to Adobe, you'll probably hear his voice directly on some of the After Effects tutorials. I think 100 plus right now, which is incredible. So he does a lot of the motion graphic training. I do some of the video editing training. The way that our solution comes up is that we offer training anywhere from 5 to 30-day self-paced classes. So our idea is that we recommend you take a certain amount of training per day. Some exciting stuff that we have coming up, just so you get familiar with our style. We have a YouTube page, and in the next week, we're starting a daily tip that is 60 seconds or less. So it just gives you a quick tip in After Effects or Premiere Pro or one of the several different applications that we teach in. And then also on our website, creative111.com, we have a blog coming out. I've sat down right now with already 10 different creators in post-production and VFX and just chatted with them about what's going on right now with the global pandemic and how industries have shifted because of the pandemic and new technologies that people are taking on, where their industries are, and we've just put it into a blog format of 10 to 15 minutes. It's something that I'm extremely passionate about. My first blog was with a gentleman by the name of David Cormakin, who is a major Canadian producer and has about 6 or 7 different shows on Netflix. So you can check that out. We'll have that once a week. It's free. Check out the blog, and you can check out our training style at Creative 111 on YouTube.
Very cool. Nick, you have an amazing teaching style. I really enjoy all of your stuff. Love the idea of trying to really approach work-life balance head on. I know that's something a lot of people struggle with, including myself, right? So really, really important. Yep. I see Ben laughing. Yeah. Ben, you struggle with work-life balance.
We don't talk about it. Definitely not in public.
But no, it is so important, right? Like creative burnout is something I have seen in my career many times, something I've dealt with. It is a real thing, right? And trying to avoid that and trying to be proactive about it and not put your head in the sand and just think I'm gonna work myself to the bone and everything's gonna be all right. That's something that it's really exciting to see you and Ian like talking about.
Yeah, and we're like really passionate about it and wanting to address it too, like also in the lines of training and different styles that we see out there. So style number one being um, the idea of trying to learn applications in the middle of 8 hours, which is somewhat forced based on careers that are out there, but trying to allow people to set out a certain time or schedule, a certain amount of hours per day that they commit to, and based on that commitment and a certain period of time, more knowledge is retained because you're repeating the task in small increments. So as little as 10 or 15 minutes a day, you do a movie, or if you have more time, like 45 minutes, you do the training, but you do it every day. And then you have more retention of that topic that you can then apply and continually to learn through other material or in real world work. So we try to balance that into your life, and we're super passionate about it.
Very cool. Exciting to see you guys kick that off. That is it's a great idea.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We are back live again at 5 o'clock with John Dickinson. Professor Dickinson is going to take us through Title Studio, right? And show us some really cool titling, an avid media composer with Continuum and Title Studio. We're going to be giving away some more prizes in the 5 o'clock hour. We're going to be giving away a seat of Maxon Cinema 4D, 1-year subscription, amazing gift. Thank you to our friends at Maxon, a 1-year subscription to Avid Media Composer, the Boris Effects Bundle. We're going to be giving away another subscription to Silhouette, another subscription to Silhouette Paint. We're going to be giving away a $100 online gift certificate to Tool Farm, which is amazing, right? So anything that Tool Farm sells, and they sell pretty much any sort of plugin out there, $100 gift sign, and something close to Nick's heart, a online pass to post-production world. See how I did that, Nick?
I like it. I did that. I see how you fit that in there. That was pretty strategic there. That was good.
Very cool. Very cool.
I might be there.
If I was smart, I would have moved that up into this hour and have you give away that prize, but I am not smart. So, yes, excited. That is actually great value and a really cool event too. You know, moving post-production world to online. That is really cool.
Yes.
All right, so thank you, everybody. We'll see you at 5. Thanks again to Ben for a great presentation. Thank you, Ben. Amazing job as always.
Nice.
Thank you, Alan, for joining us, and thank you, Nick, too, as well. All right, we'll see everyone at 5 o'clock. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Bye.